Darkstream, Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and of course, Infogalactic. I read with interest a number of the comments to last night's Darkstream. First of all, I'm pleased to see that people are beginning to understand what the issue is. That most people who are not rabid, mindless Peterson fans are able to understand that there's an actual issue here, that this is not some sort of personal jihad against the man, that this is not about my ego, this is not about any need for attention on my part, etc., etc. If you're dubious about this, if you don't know me, that's fine. What I would direct your attention to is a debate on my blog on the skepticism of Sextus Empiricus. This was a major debate. It involved me reading and deconstructing a thesis that was written by a philosophy PhD candidate. And so, I went through the whole thing very, very closely and comprehensively. No, this is old. This is long. I mean, we're probably talking something on the order of 40,000 words between the two of us, maybe more. So, when I said last night that this is what I do, I mean it. When I detect something that I believe to be entirely false, or when I detect something that I believe to be fundamentally wrong, I like to study it. And I study it in a critical manner. And I don't hesitate to share with my readers that process. This is one reason why some of my longtime readers and regulars like to follow this stuff, because they get to go along on the whole exploration process. I now know considerably more about Jordan Peterson today than I did 2 days ago, 3 days ago. So far I have read several of his interviews. I have read part of his precis, and I've read the introduction and the first chapter of 12 Rules of Life. Now, I'm not going to write a review of 12 Rules of Life until I finish it. I don't do that chapter by chapter thing because I think that it often leads you to misleading conclusions, and in fact it tends to leave the chapter by chapter critic with his pants down, because they tend to hop in and try to attack the author for, oh, you didn't address X. Well, just because the author didn't address X in chapter 1 doesn't mean he's not going to address it in chapter 9. Okay. But I definitely feel that you have to read interviews and that you have to read video transcripts, because speaking as a video producer a minor video producer myself, I am aware that video is an intrinsically rhetorical medium. Yes, you can learn from it, but if you want to take a truly dialectical and critical approach, you have to read it. We were actually talking, my producer and I were talking about our most recent Voxiversity video. It's called The Last Closet. And it's a powerful video about a very difficult subject. And what was interesting was that a lot of people were emailing me and telling me that it made them cry. Why is that interesting? Because this is nothing more than my narration of the foreword that I wrote to the book. Okay? In fact, I even have it right here, I think. Yeah. This is it. We just published the paperback last week. The Last Closet, The Dark Side of Avalon. I wrote the introduction there. Now, what was interesting about the video is that all I did was read the foreword. I'm just reading the words that I had written for the book. And yet, when you see the combination of the images that the producer added, the video clips, the music, which was actually some of which was actually composed and recorded by the author of the book. I mean, it was amazing. It was kind of funny because when the producer sent me the link to the final version, I just said, what do you think? And he said, I don't want to blow my own horn, but I was genuinely moved. So video is such an intrinsically rhetorical medium. It is so focused on moving the emotions that if you're attempting to simply understand something intellectually, it's a very poor vehicle for that. It's a great vehicle to get a basic understanding, but it's not the best way to get a true and deep understanding. And actually, to be honest with you, that's probably somewhere at the heart of my original suspicions about somebody like Jordan Peterson. Because I probably, as a fundamentally literate creature, a literary creature, don't fully trust this newfangled new invention that all the kids are using. I mean, if I just look at it at the most basic level, I don't fundamentally trust somebody who becomes a intellectual figure primarily through the use of a rhetorical medium. I'm probably naturally dubious. And especially if you compare someone like Peterson to someone like Stefan Molyneux. Stefan Molyneux does both. He's fantastic on video. He's excellent on video. You can really see his drama training. But he's a legitimate and serious author. I don't think that that's true of Jordan Peterson so far, after what I've read. I won't make a definitive judgment until I finish at least the first book. But what I will say is that as I put on my blog today, that if Jordan Peterson had written Who Moved My Cheese, it would be longer than a George R.R. Martin novel. I may read Maps of Meaning. I don't know if I'll bother. I don't know if it'll be necessary by the time I finish the first stage of my critical analysis. I mean, you have to keep in mind, I get bored, and once I get bored with something, I'm done with it. So there are probably a number of Peterson fans who know me who are praying that will happen sooner rather than later. On the other hand, I did go for 2 months on nothing more than a debate over whether the Japanese were actually capable of invading the U.S. mainland, the U.S. West Coast, in 1941. And so, we're by my usual standards, we're barely getting started. So, anyhow, 2 things that I wanted to discuss tonight. First of all was the title, The Truth Bait for the Broken. The Bait for the Broken. And, a lot of people who are Peterson fans, who are perfectly willing to admit that I'm correct in my criticisms about his intellectual dishonesty with regards to the myth of the 115 IQ, as well as some other issues, like, for example, his attempted justification of the banning of Faith Goldie from a panel that he was going to be on, and even what people are beginning to see as Peterson's intellectual cowardice. I mean, here you've got somebody who is supposedly eager to embrace criticism and all that sort of thing, and who apparently, according to some of his fans, has always been very open to engagement and that sort of thing, just suddenly remaining entirely silent on this. I mean, it'll be interesting to see how long he's going to try to remain silent, because I'm not the biggest blog out there or anything, but it does get 100,000 page views a day. The videos that I do, get about 12,000 views or so across the Voxday ones, across the 3 platforms that we put them on. And, which it's not Molyneux territory, it's not Jordan Peterson territory, but it's not negligible either. How long is he going to ignore that? I don't know. I don't care. I fully expect him to avoid engaging with it, though, for reasons that I've mentioned. That is the gamma way. The avoidance of conflict and the protection of the ego is fundamental. And so, but what a lot of his defenders have said, and I think it's a perfectly legitimate point, is they say, but look, he really has helped these various people. He really has helped, these young men who are lost, who don't know what to do, don't know where to go, don't have masculine influences, and he's really helped them. And I think that is probably true to a certain extent. But the problem with that is that you can say exactly the same thing of L. Ron Hubbard. You can say exactly the same thing of Dianetics. You can actually say much the same thing of many different cults. The fact that you are willing and able to help broken people does not mean that your intentions are good. It does not mean that you are actually going to help them in the long term. Perhaps you're using them. Perhaps you are taking advantage of them. Perhaps you only have so much that you can do for them. All right? And so, the interesting thing is if you look at the title of his book, An Antidote to Chaos. Well, an antidote only helps those individuals who are already poisoned. An antidote does not help people who are healthy. Given that an antidote is usually made from the venom of the poison that it's meant to counteract, it could even be harmful. I don't actually know. I've never paid any attention to venom and venom antidotes and so forth, but you get the point. And so, even if what Peterson is saying happens to benefit some of these broken people, we may be dealing with something that is intellectually iatrogenic. And as some of the commenters are noting here, what we're seeing is something that is bad for you, and I can tell you this already, that his core philosophy is very, very bad for you and will have extremely deleterious long-term effects if you take it seriously and try to live your life by it. Here's one of the problems that I've noticed. I pointed out the problems that Jordan Peterson has. Actually, I should say Sam Harris pointed out the problems that Jordan Peterson has with something as simple and basic as the definition of truth. Okay? How are you going to successfully build a long-term philosophy for your life, even a series of heuristics for your life, if you cannot understand or identify what truth is? Now, what's interesting is that his defenders have produced, by my count so far, 3 different definitions of what Jordan Peterson meant by truth. Now, what the most sophisticated one was going on about how Peterson subscribes to the coherence theory of truth, as opposed to the Aristotelian correspondence theory of truth, which he talks about Harris subscribing to. I definitely subscribe to it, being an Aristotelian myself. So I'm certain that Edward Fazer does, as do all sane, honest people. The fact that you can name a particular form of philosophical bullshit does not change the fact that it is philosophical bullshit. All right? First of all, the idea that it's very dubious the moment that you start talking about divergent theories of truth. We already have perfectly good definitions of truth. If you look in the dictionary and you construct your philosophy on the basis of truth as it is defined in the dictionary, you've got a reasonably sound basis. Okay? Now, I certainly understand the idea of distinguishing between different forms of truth. I do it all the time. I talk about the small t truth, which is the pedestrian, everyday truth of it is so or it is not. And then I also talk about the capital T truth, which is, of course, the Christian perspective, the reality which we only see darkly, the greater reality that we cannot fully perceive. Okay? The point is that the small t truth exists in either case. It doesn't magically change because we have a theory that opposes it somehow. And so, and that was just one of them. His other defenders were coming up with other definitions of truth. So what I'm noticing about Peterson's defenders is that whatever it is that they've taken away from Peterson is not the same thing. It varies depending on the person, which tells you right there the man cannot be teaching legitimate, confirmable, reality-based truth because people are coming away with different understandings of exactly the same definition, exactly the same term. One of my partners noted in the precis that Peterson hides his definitions. He tries to give himself massive wiggle room by putting everything in quotes. It's unreal. It is, I would tend to say that it is indicative of a fundamentally dishonest mind, which, by the way, we know Peterson has. By his own account, he talks about when he was younger, that 90%, I think at one time he actually said 95%, of his self-talk was dishonest. Peterson lies to himself. When he's telling you how important it is to tell the truth to yourself, when he's reminding you of that, he's actually reminding himself. Remember, Peterson is what we call a gamma. And so he is constantly engaged in an ongoing monologue with himself. All of his fans think that he's talking to them, but he's not. He is desperately trying to fix his own broken mind. Now, he's brilliant. He's very intelligent. Because only someone who is as intelligent as he is could construct a delusionary system to protect a broken mind that is as superficially coherent as it is. He's smart enough to construct this system in a way that those who are of normal intelligence cannot see that it's bullshit. It is ironclad bullshit. It's bullshit that is wrapped, gift wrapped by a very high IQ, relatively sophisticated intellect. But it's still bullshit, and it's still the product of a broken mind, and it requires a sufficiently intelligent, non-broken mind to see through it. I didn't need much. If you notice, I didn't need much to see through it. The lack of integrity that Peterson demonstrated when his adherence to the myth of the 115 IQ was called into question by one of his commenters was sufficient to prove to me that this was somebody who had absolutely no interest in the truth as you and I and all normal, sane people understand it to be. All right? That was all I needed to know about that. And so I can't go into his philosophy bridging modernism and postmodernism yet because I haven't gone deep enough into his philosophy. I think that it's probably true that he is a synthesis of the two. You could call it transmodernism, as some have. But I can't say anything sufficiently insightful about that yet because I don't know it well enough yet. But I will. But what I can tell you about is the extreme superficiality and the just petty, minor utility of the first chapter that he wrote. I want you to do a comparison. What I'd like you to do is I would like you to go to the blog when you get a chance. Go to voxday.blogspot.com and look at the 4 posts that are called Graduating Gamma. And yes, I'm talking about the lobster chapter here. If you compare the information that is merely on the first post, the first Graduating Gamma post, I did not write it myself. This is something that one of my readers, who was a former Gamma who managed to transform his life and become a productive, confident, in shape Delta, is something that he wrote to try to help others make the same change in their lives that he had made in his. And what you will see is that what took Jordan Peterson an entire chapter to write, a huge justification of standing up straight, This graduating Gamma author managed to do in about 3 sentences. Not only that, but he provides considerably more information than simply stand up straight and try to look more dominant. If you look at the amount of information that Peterson has conveyed there is less information, less useful, practical information than there often was on a single post on any game blog. His explanation of dominance, his explanation that is, diving back into all of this useless, pointless crap about lobsters, is more than covered by anyone talking, even by Royce, or by Royce, by Roosh, by anyone who has ever addressed the basic alpha-beta dichotomy. We all know about this, dominance posture stuff. It's not news. It's not new. Now, it may be new to some of these unfortunates that he is talking to, and that's fine. It doesn't hurt anybody to be told to stand up straight. However, when you are relying on telling them to stand up straight because evolution demands it, suddenly you start getting into some problems. All right, that's another good point. Gorilla Mindset has considerably more useful information on dominance and posture and all that sort of thing than that first chapter of the 12 Rules of Life. Now, I'm sure there's more in the other chapters. We'll get to that. But my point is that what we're dealing with here is a vast amount of verbal spewage that is just utilized to cover the fact that virtually nothing is being said. It's tragic that people think this stuff is significant. If you want to read something significant, read Taleb's stuff. Skin in the Game, Anti-Fragile, Black Swan. This is stuff that is new, and this is stuff that is meaningful. Peterson's crap is utterly trivial. It's utterly vapid. And so, and in terms of if you want information, practical information for dealing with SJWs, my 2 books on the subject are vastly better than his. There is nothing in any of his lectures, in any of his book that is going to tell you how to survive an SJW attack. SJWs Always Lie does. SJWs Always Double Down helps you understand where the SJWs are coming from. And yes, it wouldn't surprise me to hear that Peterson has read SJWs Always Lie. I don't think he's read SJWs Always Double Down. But it wouldn't surprise me to hear he's read the first one, because he's definitely said some things that sound very familiar. And one thing we also know about Peterson is that he likes to hide the fact that he is taking information from someone else. I'm not referring to that because I don't actually know, but I'm referring to some other examples that other people have pointed out to me where he's basically taken someone else's argument and more or less passed it off as his own. I mean, to be honest, I'm not, it's on the blog, you can read in the comments. I'm not frankly inclined to ping the guy for cribbing something in an interview because frankly, we've all, first of all, you don't necessarily remember exactly where you got something from. when you're in the middle of an interview. Somebody asks you a question, you answer the question. In an interview context, there's absolutely no obligation to provide the footnotes. And so, but it does start to get, you do start to wonder about somebody's intellectual credibility when they do that. Yes, but you have to understand, when you say he credits Jung, Nietzsche, and Solzhenitsyn frequently, he's name dropping there. There's a difference between name dropping famous names so that you can, claim that you're a big intellectual who has read them. I mean, there's one thing I did notice. I haven't watched a whole video, but I did watch this little 5-minute video where he was talking about how dishonest he was with himself and how much he talked to himself and how he was amazed that he could observe his own dishonesty or something. It was frankly, it made him look completely nuts. But he had this reference to Dostoevsky that was totally incoherent. He was basically, he just wanted an excuse to say that he'd read Dostoevsky. I mean, so fucking what? I've read Dostoevsky. Who hasn't? And so, okay, a lot of people haven't, but I'm saying if you're a literary person and so forth, that's a good question. Do you think he fears the rise of the right more than he loves the truth? Absolutely. Peterson's primary goal is to get in the way of the right, to subvert the right. That's one thing that I've been trying to explain to people is he is not one of us and he is not even an ally. He is actually, people say, oh, but he's doing so much to fight the SJWs. No, he's not. He is more of an ally to the SJWs than he is to us. Okay? The Mensheviks fought the Bolsheviks too because they wanted, they were struggling for power. So the fact that he is a left liberal taking on the SJWs just means that he wants his left liberalism to reign supreme and not the SJWs. He's definitely consciously trying to do this. His whole main focus, according to his friend who wrote the introduction, is to prevent the rise of the Nazis from creating another Holocaust. And so, he is objectively and by his own admission anti-right. Okay, I don't know if I can be any clearer than this. Jordan Peterson is not on the side of the right. Jordan Peterson is an enemy of the right. And the reason that he's hanging out with people like Ben Shapiro is because he is there as a William F. Buckley 3.0 figure. He is there as a neocon who is attempting to subvert and redirect the right. The left is terrified because communism has failed, socialism has failed, the neoliberal world order is failing, multiculturalism has failed, diversity has failed. All of these things have failed, and what does that leave? It leaves the truth. It leaves the true right. The conservative movement has failed. All that is left is the truth. And so what do we have? We suddenly have this new guru being thrown out there as this grand champion of this weird truth that doesn't correspond with reality and doesn't exist in the objective world. I'm paraphrasing here. Again, video is a rhetorical element. But of course, the best rhetoric is always that which is in service of the truth. And the truth is that Jordan Peterson's philosophy is bait for the broken. It is Dianetics 2.0. It's an L. Ron Hubbard style sail that, will fix you up a little bit and then will mislead you. I don't have any concerns that I'm drawing sweeping conclusions from chapter 1 of his work, because that's not, my conclusions have nothing to do with it. There's not enough there in chapter 1 to tell you anything except for the fact that the guy can't get to the point to save his life. There is virtually no there in chapter 1. Like I said, if you compare that chapter to the single blog post, you'll see that the blog post has far more useful and practical information. And that's the point, is I am not claiming at this point to have conclusively proved what I am saying. I am simply telling you what I think. And what you're going to see is over the next few days, over the next few weeks, I am going to continue to hone my opinion. I'm going to continue to amass the evidence, and I'm going to continue to build my case. This is kind of this is a mutual exploration, you might say. But I have already seen enough to have developed these strong opinions. And, it would not be exaggerating. I'm not reviewing the work chapter by chapter, so just drop it, okay? I did not review I'm not reviewing the work. I described the chapter, and I did it here on a video. This is not a written review. This is not a review of the book. I'm just talking about what I learned from reading the chapter. But, so, my opinions are fairly strong. Okay, let's get rid of this moron. People don't seem to understand this is not a debate. So what's going to be interesting to see is how much of his work holds up to scrutiny. How much of his philosophy holds up to scrutiny. I mean, the funny thing is, how can any Peterson supporter who has heard what Peterson has said about the importance of listening to criticism and the importance of being honest and the importance of being truthful, how can anyone possibly object to what I'm doing? I'm not going to lie about the guy. I am not interested in taking anything he says out of context. When my opinions are based on incomplete information right now. What's going to be interesting is to see how accurate these initial opinions are. When I first started looking at Peterson, I just thought he lacked a bit of intellectual integrity. Now, I assume that his philosophy was probably generally positive pablum. That was my initial assumption. Now, the more that I look at it, the more I realize it is actually pernicious. It is actually the product of a broken mind. And it is something that is not useful to anyone who is mentally healthy. And in fact, it is likely to lead them into negative pathways, negative patterns, and a negative psychological mindset. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm correct. I have not yet conclusively proved this. Okay? So for those of you who are big Peterson fans, if I'm wrong about this, I will tell you. If I can't make my case, I will admit it. You know, those of you who have read me for the last 15 years know perfectly well that I am not going to refrain from saying, you know what, I think I got it wrong, and here's why. I did it with free trade. I've done it with a number of things. But as his fan, she's been aggressively defending him on my site, as she just said, but I'm probably not wrong. I am very, very seldom wrong once I know enough to get to the point that I can develop an opinion as strong as this. I've been doing this for a long time. I know what these things look like. You know, I mean, it's kind of like when you're outside and you smell something and you think something smells like cow manure, you're very seldom wrong, because once you've smelled cow manure enough times, you know what it smells like. Okay? I have encountered enough philosophical bullshit that I know the smell of it. And so, anyhow, this is going to be interesting. This is going to be informative. You know, don't get your panties in a bunch about it. Okay? We're going on this intellectual exploration together. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be fun. And who knows what we'll find at the end. I have a pretty good idea of what we'll find, but we'll see. And yes, that is a bottle of excellent wine in what is a facsimile of a lady's shoe. But more about that another time. Anyhow, if you have, am I going on Stefan's show anytime soon? You'll have to ask Stefan that. I don't invite myself on anybody's show, but his is one of the few invitations that I do accept when they're extended. So, in any event, and yes, for those of you who keep asking, I am more than happy to debate Jordan Peterson, preferably in a written form, but I'd also be willing to do it in a live form. But I wouldn't hold your breath. Have a good evening. Stop by the blog, drop off your comments there, and we will talk to you soon. Have a good evening.